Welcome to the Radiance Films Podcast, a monthly show dedicated to all things Radiance Films. I am your host, Adam Lundy, and I am exceptionally delighted that our first guest for this very first episode on this journey is the founder and director of Radiance Films, Mr. Fran Simeoni. Hello, Fran.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm excellent. I cannot tell you how big of a pleasure it is to have you on here. I've been kicking around the idea of doing this podcast for a few months or even maybe even longer. And having you on was always going to be like an end game goal, establish the brand, get a build up, get out there, and then maybe Fran will come on. So when you said yes, like nearly immediately, as soon as our mutual friend reached out, I was over the moon, and I'm so happy that you made time for me today, to come on here and have a chat about these titles.
Well, thank you for having me, and thanks for doing this podcast. So having a podcast dedicated to the label is a real privilege and something I'm very um, proud and excited about.
That's great. It's great to hear. Um, Obviously, look, we have a good few things to cover today. Obviously, we're going to be talking about the announcements that happened. We're recording this literally on Friday the 9th, so the announcements only went up a few hours ago. So we're going to talk about those. We're obviously going to talk about the releases that came out last month in July. Before we get into that stuff, for those who may not be familiar, I do another podcast called They Live by Film, and my co-host there, Chris Haskell, he interviewed you for that podcast. If I remember correctly, it was around the November before you launch. So what's that, November 2022 now, I guess. Obviously, the first releases came out in January 2023. So we're over 18 months in the Radiance journey. Like, how have things been kind of since in the last 18 months or so?
Um, how to answer that? I mean, it's really breakneck speed stuff. I mean, we're a small operation, so Um, it's constantly busy. People are always sort of emailing me and saying, "Oh, hey, how's it going? Hope you're busier than last time." And I'm always like, "Nope, it's still the same." But I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way, really. I like being busy. I like getting involved in lots of stuff. Um, I think it's the same. I'm probably saying the same thing of when I started the label, which is I
Hmm.
like being at the coalface. I like getting involved in every aspect, whether that's putting the release together or chatting with customers. I mean, I've even been doing the customer service emails the last month or so, and a few people have responded and said, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're doing the customer service." And I have responded and said as much as, I quite like doing it. It's nice being direct with customers and really getting to the bottom of what their feelings are about stuff. And that really helps me to kind of shape the label and tweak things if necessary and just kind of keep doing things that people want to see happen.
Yeah. There's definitely seems to be an openness with you guys compared to bigger labels, and maybe that's just because, like you said, you're a small operation at the moment, at least. There's another aspect of that that I'll touch on in a little while, but I do definitely like that kind of openness. Like from a consumer standpoint, for me, like I've been picking up the releases every month since you started because, after you did the first interview with Chris, he sent me the link, and you had the pre-orders up for it would have been Working Class Goes to Heaven, Big Time Gambling Boss, and I think you were doing the pre-orders for the Franco Nero set as well when you first launched. And I remember I ordered all those. And I thought, oh, this is cool, a new label. Maybe I'll start collecting these, and this, might be fun. And then obviously I haven't stopped. Been getting every release every month since. And it seems as well, I'm very involved in Reddit and especially in the boutique Blu-ray subreddit. And it seems like the rise of the label's reputation has been meteoric. And I think that really attests to the quality of the products that you put out. And also, that aspect of, always kind of being an approachable label. But like like whenever I see a post saying, hey, does anyone recommend, a label? Like say they're in the US, like I just got a region free player, what should I get? People are always recommending Radiant stuff. People are always asking questions about Radiance releases. Whenever the Radiance announcements come out, the thread for that on Boutique Blu-ray is always hot with people talking about it. So it really does seem it's been, at least from my standpoint in this area, like a real meteoric kind of rise. And I hope that you guys are seeing that, from a sales end as well, because obviously, the success of companies like Radiance that do put out really niche stuff. It's great for the consumer. I've been saying it for years that when we can get, these very niche films put out in impeccable quality in terms of the actual product, the packaging, the special features, it's great that we live in a world like this where companies like Radiance can exist. Because otherwise, this is stuff will all be lost to time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very true. It's a strange time, I think, I find it at least being a strange time being a collector, because on the one hand, I'm sort of thinking, oh God, I've got to get all those Fox Blu-rays that are out there
Mm,
that may never come back. And then sometimes I'm more optimistic and I think, oh, Disney will see the light one day.
yeah,
And then I think, oh, well, I've got to get those, more rare things, the things that Radiance are doing, because those aren't going to come back. Those aren't even going to be on a streaming platform. At least in the Fox stuff, some of it you can watch. So I find myself sort of oscillating between those two sort of very different extremes in terms of how I want to keep my collection building going. And we're getting real riches, I think, on the sort of more obscure end. And I think that's possibly a reaction to the studio side being closed up and
mm,
the rapidity with which we're getting so much stuff, because we've got, behemoths like Kino and Imprint and, many other labels just kind of pumping out so much stuff that I think labels have got to be a bit more creative with what they're putting out.
yeah,
And I think it's always a case of if you build it, they'll come, to a point, obviously. Um, so, I think we're seeing a great time for collectors because, you know, Radiance has done what it's done, but then, you can look at someone like Third Window, which is also doing really great obscure stuff. Um, and, Deaf Crocodile is another one.
mm,
And everyone seems to really be enjoying that stuff. And I think the more that is allowed to flourish, the more bands that are convinced, let's say, the more the discussion is going to increase, and the more awareness is going to be there for those labels to keep doing what they're doing. So yeah, I count myself very fortunate that this has all kind of happened as the label has been launched. And I honestly didn't know when I launched the label whether it would sustain. I went out with the initial 10 that we announced as a bit of a statement, but I very much thought to myself, I may have to fall back on, safe bets,
mm,
the kind of stuff I knew would sell. But the fact that we're still doing like Slap the Monster on page one, which we announced today,
yeah,
which isn't a safe bet, but feels a bit more comfortable now, 2 years in, that the audience is there and they're just saying, yeah, this is great. I definitely want this. So that's really exciting for me because I'm more interested in doing the stuff that isn't a safe bet that I know, another label isn't going to get to. So that's definitely my preference.
yeah. And like, and you're helping build that as well yourself. Like, I'll use Slap the Monster on page one as an example. In terms of my standard movie going experience, probably wouldn't be a movie I would normally pick up if it was by any other label. But then because it has the main actor from Working Class Goes to Heaven, which I loved, which again I would have never seen if it wasn't for Radiance putting it out, then like now I want to see this because this actor blew me away in this one film. So now I want to see him again because again, these kind of films you would have been are so niche, they're so hard to find. As soon as another one becomes available, you have to pick it up because you want to kind of continue that discovery experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a conscious effort on our part to keep threads like that going. I mean, Gian Maria Volonté is one of my favorite actors, so that's kind of an easy one for me to keep that
Mm.
going. Um, and we've got a few of his films now, and hopefully we'll keep that going as well, with more to come in the future.
Yeah,
But I do think that enriches the experience for the buyer, because even when I'm working on this stuff, I get a real kick out of it. So I imagine the same is true for the buyer when they buy the working class goes to heaven, and then they buy something else, and then in the extras someone's talking about the film, and that's not orchestrated by us. We will sort of ask people to speak about the subject, but it's down to them what they're saying. So it is very gratifying when one of those interviewees will sort of say, "Oh, you know," and then there's this touchstone film, and it's something we've released, and it's almost like, you know, it's a little fist bump there. Um, Not a fist
Yeah.
bump, you know, a high five in the office. It's kind of like, yay, you know, our title got mentioned, and that does kind of give me confidence that we're on the right track, and you know, we're choosing the right films, and it is the hope that, you know, these films do enter the consciousness a bit more, and become more aware, because you know, in many cases they will be known to a certain audience or within their home country, but most of the time not so much, you know, in the UK or the US where we're releasing. So to kind of, you know, change the story a bit is really gratifying.
Hmm. And I've been saying that as well to a few people. Ryan Farrell, for example, who runs the Disconnected. He has a film sort of journal film magazine that he puts out, and I'm actually working on a piece for that at the moment about how Radiance is challenging the canon of film in what you're releasing, and it's tying into what you're saying there. You know, these are like some of the films that you guys have put out are some of the best films I've ever seen, but I've never heard of them because they don't appear on Sight and Sound lists because
Yeah.
they're not available. But we've seen it in the past when films become more available, more people get to see them and they enter the zeitgeist and people start putting them on their lists. You know, a great example of that is like Set and Tango. You know, nobody was able to see Set and Tango for so long because, you know, it was all just really old prints and stuff. And then suddenly the likes of Arbelos and stuff get to put it out in the last few years. And now it's jumping up everyone's kind of top film lists because people actually get a chance to sit down and watch it. Which is something that I love that you guys are doing this, that you're taking these obscure films that are by celebrated filmmakers and or you know have great actors or have won awards, but they've never been really kind of widely seen. They've never had these great kind of releases. So now more people can see them, can appreciate them, and then, you know, hopefully, you know, we might start seeing films that you've released maybe crop up on these kind of top film lists and stuff like that, which are all asinine, really. You know, lists are just lists at the end of the day, but it's always nice when you see this stuff show up, you know, and you enjoy the films. Um, so what we'll do, just before we get into the releases, before you know, earlier this week, I went on to the subreddits for Radiance and for Boutique Blu-ray, and I basically just put out a post just saying, you know, I'm going to be doing this. Does anyone want to, you know, come and ask some questions? So I gathered a ton. There was like 50 odd questions that got asked. I got a lot more interest than I thought I was going to get. I regretted putting it on two different subreddits. So I've kind of condensed the questions down. I've kind of simplified some of them and, you know, just kind of put together what I think were, you know, cover most bases. So I'm going to try and run through these kind of as quick as possible. I hope hopefully none of them will take too long because I do want to obviously talk about these releases and stuff. So I'm going to kind of run through these with you, Fran. The first off, I think is probably the one I'm sure you probably get asked a lot, or are probably expecting to be asked. 4K UHD, any plans for that in the future?
Watch this space.
Okay, perfect. That's good to hear. I think the listeners will be okay with that answer as well. Um, if money and rights were no object, what would be your dream release?
Um, I don't. I mean, I think it doesn't really come down to money. I think the biggest problems we have are rights, really,
Yeah.
more than anything. Because you know, I think it's very easy to assume, oh, you know, if we had bundles of cash, we could get whatever we wanted. But that's only really the case when I think you're looking at big kind of IP type stuff,
Hmm.
um, where the studio will only let you have it if you really make it their while, worth their while. But that's just not what we do. So I don't think it would be a money thing because I don't see us ever kind of looking to, you know, take on a very big established seller.
Yeah.
That's
We're not going to
very
get a
much
Radiant
my
Star Wars box set in the future, I would
no.
guess.
I mean, even anything of a moderate level, that was very much my former life at Arrow, and
Mm,
I've ticked that box, and I don't really need to be doing that anymore. I don't think, and it excites me much more to look at small stuff, which isn't in the same way, isn't costly.
hmm
It's not cheap, but there is quite a difference between releasing, you know, Misunderstood, by Luigi Comencini, which we restored, and
Yeah.
was not cheap. But then when you're doing something like The Thing, or Big Trouble in Little China, or something like that, that's many, many times more expensive. So that's not really a challenge for us, which is interesting position to be in, because that means the challenges are in a completely different place, and it does come down much more to rights, and even the right situation isn't always a case of, there's a disagreement between producers, or
hmm
some other underlying rights aren't cleared, like music or the original novel being relicensed by the producers, which does come up now and again.
hmm
Sometimes it's a case of, this company's kind of got the in with that company, and they only want to work with them, or um, someone's out there, and they've got the rights, but they're sort of difficult to actually find. I mean, there are films on my list that I'm just sort of scratching my head over where the hell it could be.
Right.
So sometimes it's situations like that, which is not as difficult to overcome as some of the other things I mentioned, where we've gone for films and the studio will just say, yeah, uh, the music rights aren't cleared, and it will cost so much money for us to clear it. It's not worth anybody trying, and that's obviously really disappointing. But there's
hmm
very little that we can do about that.
That's fair. I can tell you what my dream release would be, and this will hopefully be a nudge. Uh, Los Olvidados, Buñuel. That would be my dream release.
Well, I mean, Buñuel is probably my favorite director of all time. So I would be firmly on board with that, but it's not going to be a Radiance release,
Uh,
unfortunately.
yeah, I've
Um,
heard that the rights
See
are a
the
bit of a
previous
nightmare.
answer.
Yeah, that's fair.
Dream releases for me, I mean, I think I've kind of said it before. The Mattei affair is really up there for me. I mean, that's one
hmm
of my all-time favorite films. Again, sort of see the previous answer. It's sort of just a bit of a difficult one.
It is what it
Um,
is. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of things. It's sort of that question is quite difficult to answer, because there's like a flood of things all sort of coming at me at once,
I
and
understand. I get you.
I'm loath to mention too many things, because some of them might happen. So we'll see. I don't want to jinx it.
That's completely fair. The next question was about box sets. Obviously, a lot of the all the box sets you've released so far have all had three films. Would there be any interest in doing kind of larger box sets in the future? Maybe to have like five or six, or are
Yeah,
you
we do
happy?
have a larger box set in production at the moment.
Oh, very
I
cool.
think the three film thing has just been the case so far, because that's what's worked for each set. I mean, the Cosa Nostra set was intended to be four, with Confessions of a Police Captain, but we couldn't get the rights to that.
Oh, interesting.
So
Okay.
yeah, I mean, that box set went for a few permutations, because Damiani has made more than three, gangster infused films.
hmm
Um, so yeah, there was a bigger plan there, but it was what it was, and I think it still really works as it finished.
Okay.
Um, and then yeah, the Dino Risi, I kind of thought each of the Commedia all'Italiana volumes would be in groups of three, because I had so many films planned, and they kind of broke down into groups of three. And then the rest was sort of trilogies, and things which fit in terms of their curation. So it's been a coincidence so far.
Okay. Oh, it's interesting to know then that it was
Yeah.
coincidental.
I mean, the other thing I sort of thought was, I don't want to have loads of box sets that are all um, unwieldy and different sizes, and
Yeah.
kind of end up making the collection feel, um, I don't know, cluttered or something. I'm not sure. I quite like the fact that they're all a similar size. I'm going to try and keep that going because, for one thing, obviously everyone's really struggling for shelf space, and for another, I think it makes for the design consistency to work nicely.
Yeah, I do like that I can with my box sets I turn them around so that the spines of each individual films are facing out and everything does pretty much line
Ah,
up. Um, but I am now when the releases for August when they come out at the end of the month, I am going to be moving on to the second level of my shelf because the first top level is now full. So I am going to be moving down to level two. So yeah, definitely struggling for shelf space. So that's
yeah,
understandable.
it's
Um,
a common problem.
yeah. One thing that I kind of semi highlighted earlier, just in terms of your transparency. One thing I really loved that you guys did was on your letterbox, you put out a list of titles that you just weren't able to license for this year that you had tried and failed for one reason or another. Is that something that you guys would maybe continue to do? At the end of this year, will you put up a similar list, or was that just kind of a
Yeah,
one-off?
I'm working on the list.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was about a month ago, and I thought, oh God, I haven't been keeping track. So I started making a list, and I got to 10 quite quickly,
Okay.
um,
That's good.
which is just what happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I can't remember what sparked that idea, but it may have just been frustration over not getting one of the films. Probably Visitor Q, which I sort of think about every now and again, is one of my, well, probably is my favorite Miike film, and
It's funny that you mentioned that
very
because
frustrating.
the reason that question came up was because a few different people had asked in the Reddit thread, would Fran ever want to do a Miike release? And I had said, well, he tried in Visitor Q, it didn't work out if it's on their letterbox. So a lot of people didn't even realize you had that list on your letterbox account. So I kind of pointed them in the right direction.
Yeah, I
So
mean, I
that
think that was another reason we got asked so many times, and I just sort of said, oh, may as well put people out of their misery and make sure they hang on to their DVDs because it doesn't look like it's coming out. So yeah, really frustrating. I just sort of thought, if I could be told, I'd want to know. So, it's very easy to just get rid of DVDs and think, yeah, this will get upgraded, get rid of
Mhm.
that. And then of course time passes, you think, I wish I had that DVD again. Now it's 100 quid. So I thought that's just a bit of a service really for the fans that I would want myself. Um,
Yeah, and
so
that's what I
yeah, I
was saying. I love
mean,
the
we'll
transparency
keep it
there.
going
Yeah.
where possible. I mean, hopefully the number of failures will go down, but I mean,
Yeah, the fact that you've
it's
hit 10
just kind of
already
the
is not
way it is.
promising. So, yeah. Just have just a couple of more. I'm gonna try and strike a few of these off because obviously I don't want to be spending too long on these. Um, in terms of the director books, obviously you put out the Taikato book. Any kind of more plans for more books like that down the line? Because I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, I keep thinking about it, and I just haven't had the time to really devote enough time to really come up with a plan. I think
Hmm.
I'm kind of waiting for I don't know, a bit of inspiration, a bit of serendipity. I mean, we'll see what happens. Someone comes up with some amazing idea, and I think, yeah, this is incredible. Let's definitely do that. It might
Hmm.
happen. But at the moment, it's a bit. It's not that it's like on the back burner because we don't have faith in it. I think it's on the back burner just because things are so busy. But
Yeah,
I'd definitely like to do something on that in the future for sure.
cool. And then the last kind of question I have on this, which was probably the most popular and the one that kind of was asked the most in, different ways. In terms of like your strategy for deciding what films you're going to go after, like, is there a strategy or is it a mix of, oh, I want to do this film, or, maybe a studio says, hey, would you want to do this? Is it a mixed bag, or do you have a set strategy for deciding, what you actually want to go out and license?
Um, it's hard to pin it down into just one sentence because there's all different kinds of influences. So I think the first thing is that I don't really react to people saying, hey, look at the new list, which is just a sort of easy way to kind of go down and go check 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 check, we'll take these please.
Hmm.
Which I'm just not doing that anymore. That was kind of the way things used to work to an extent. And certainly the way, bigger companies will work because they've got a big requirement to do X, Y, and Z. And so they need to get, a huge amount of titles in to, fulfill various requirements that they have, partners and so on. So we don't have anything like that. So it is very much down to what works, what way's the wind blowing, what we fascinated by, what's, you know, new and exciting, whether that be something we just watched randomly or something that's been newly restored, or just sort of reacting to our own stuff. You sort of think, oh, we've got enough of this type of thing. Let's look at something else. And that comes from a variety of different things that I'm kind of um, managing, I suppose. We've got various lists and ongoing projects and things. I think, well, I want to do that thing that I've kind of had noted down, and eventually it will kind of happen. So there's all sorts of stuff like that. And it all just kind of gets thrown in and then determined whether we have space for it, thinking about cost, restoration, and keeping a good balance. I mean, every month I want to be able to have an announcement where people say it's a nice mix. I don't want to get to the point
Yeah.
where it's like all too much of one thing or too one country heavy or too one genre heavy. So definitely having that mix is what's most important.
And like it is more of a follow-on question, I guess, than the one that was there. Like, would previous sort of sale trends influence that as well? Like, for example, like Planet of the Vampires. Let's just say you sold a ton of Planet of the Vampires. Would that then influence you then to go and try and get more Italian sci-fi or more Bava or whatever it may be? Or again, is that not really kind of what you consider?
Not really. I think it's really hard to do that with credibility because I think a lot of the time when something works really, really well, there's not always another thing that you can say, oh, well, that's going to be the same thing. That'll produce the same result.
Hmm.
And I think that's just a bit, that's kind of against our principles, I suppose, curation principles. Not like we've got nothing against making money, but when you've done as we have, Planet of Vampires, and it's been a great success, it's not easy to then go, right, well, let's get one of Bava's other films because they're all done or spoken for
Yeah.
or not available or whatever. And then you can't just say, oh, let's get another really good Italian horror film because, well, for one, that's an oversaturated market. And for two, if you want to have something that's really great, it's not just going to be sitting there for you to find. These things usually take a lot of research um, and a lot of time to kind of put together. So even from one year to the next, even from one Halloween to the next Halloween, if you like,
Yeah.
it's very difficult um, to replicate that within that time because that's actually not a lot of time when it comes to producing Blu-rays. I mean, from inception to shelf, it's about a year. So
Wow.
when if it sells out on release day, even then, if you want to do the same result again, you've got to be acting very, very quickly. Um, and so when we do have that kind of thing, when we have like a volume two or something that feels quite similar, it's already planned for.
Hmm.
And um, I much prefer working that way because I think that gives us a greater deal of control, and that's something I'm quite pedantic about, I suppose.
Well, it makes sense. Perfect. So we'll get jumping into the announcements that just happened today, the August announcements for November. So four single releases this time, no box sets. So I assume there's probably gonna be a box set in December, but you're not going to tell me that, of course. So four single releases for November. Some of these I'm really excited about. There's one in particular that I'm most excited about. I'm going to save that one to last. So first one we have here is a Kenji Fukusaka movie that probably has the most Yakuza name ever. Japan Organized Crime Boss. I do love the Yakuza titles. Obviously not the first Fukusaku film that you guys have put out. Um, and obviously, you're very familiar with his work, but obviously previously with Arrow, with the battles without honor and humanity sets, and now obviously you've taken a few of his films here as well. I take it this was another one that was kind of planned, or you probably kind of had that agreement when you had sort of licensed the previous ones to kind of do this at some point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this was actually the first Fukusaku film that I ever saw
Oh,
on Eureka's DVD. I think it was. There may have been. Probably a couple all watched around the same time. Um, so yeah, this was always on my list for that, possibly for that reason. I do also think it's very good. And when I took on Fukusaku at Radiance, I was sort of very conscious to only do what I think are his top tier films.
hmm,
So I mean, I even watched a bunch that I hadn't seen before or around when Radiant started, and just sort of thought, yeah, they're okay, but do we need a Blu-ray of it? And that's very much a guiding principle for everything we do. Sometimes I watch something and think, yeah, it's fine, but I have to remember at the end of the day that people can quite easily spend their money on some other release somewhere else. So I do always want to make sure the quality is as high as can be.
of course, yeah.
So yeah, and also conscious that we're building like a mini Fukasaku collection here. So and again in the same way as well goes back to what I was saying, where you've got these threads. It's not just the thread of Fukasaku, but it's the thread of all the Yakuza films as well. So
Hmm.
that's something definitely in my mind. As people are seeing these actors in particular through Fukasaku's films, through Taikato's films, and Tomisaburo Wakayama now is like our most represented actor. I think we've got like 11 or 12 of his films now. So I
Yeah.
was also conscious of that.
And I'll say the artwork is phenomenal for this release. It's gorgeous, the artwork that you did. And I suppose that's something I can say for nearly every release. You do put a lot of effort into, well, I can tell you put a lot of effort into the artwork that you do. It is incredibly striking. I can only imagine how nice it's going to look once I take the OBI strip out. But yeah, the artwork is phenomenal. Like I will say, and this is kind of a precursor to when we talk about 18 years in prison. I'm not the biggest Yakuza guy. I do kind of struggle with them a little bit. I struggle to keep up with what's going on. They all move so quick. Um, but I'm very interested to watch this one, and I will of course be watching it when it comes out. Um, we talked a little bit already about Slap the Monster on page one. Again, like with pretty much all of your films, I've never heard of it before, of course, so I don't really know much about it. Obviously, I was reading, the sort of blurb that you have on it. I'm just kind of curious. I'm trying to figure out what kind of a film it is. Like, is it more of like a social drama like Working Class Goes to Heaven, or is it more of like a political thriller?
It's probably somewhere in between, actually.
Okay.
I mean, it's not Z. It doesn't have that sense of urgency
Hmm.
because it's from the perspective of a newspaper. So there's no sort of secret police and there's no underground militants and all that kind of thing, which you do sort of get in sort of more Costa Gavras style thriller. um so this is sort of going more towards Working Class Goes to Heaven, if you like,
Hmm.
in terms of it's more like regular people. It's more like things that perhaps we can relate to. But interestingly, it's about media manipulation, which we're obviously hearing a lot about now. So it
Yeah,
sort of
of
feels a
course.
bit more relevant than perhaps it did, in the last 20 years when the DVD came out. When I first saw it, it was Italian DVD, however many years ago. And I imagine it didn't sort of connect as well then, and maybe that's why it never came out in other countries. So I do think it's sort of a bit more relevant now, and I think anyone who likes Volonte will find this to be a really interesting performance because he's playing he's playing the bad guy essentially. So
I was gonna say, yeah, he doesn't
yeah,
seem like he's the.
it's a different kind of role than we've seen, at least from Radiance. And he's just great. He's great in everything. So it's very much his film. You know, he is the central presence, um, and yeah, it's Italy's Years of Lead, which is the other thing, which is maybe a little bit misleading, but it very much is that period. I mean, I think Years of Lead now might be construed as that as the kind of um, poliziotesco kind of action and trash. But I mean, it was the time that people spoke about then. You know, Years of Lead is what they called it in Italy at the time. It was in the newspapers. It was a time of great social unrest. So it's more about social unrest than it is about like being a poliziotesco. It's not a poliziotesco.
Interesting. Yeah, it seems like a good kind of middle ground film in terms of touching on different areas. I'll definitely look forward to looking at the special features, especially if some of them kind of give context, because when you go into some films that you're just completely unfamiliar with the social standing of, the country at that time, a lot of stuff can go over your head. So, having special features to give context is obviously huge for, in terms of being able to enjoy these types of films. But like you
Yeah, I mean
said,
that's why we often get critics from the country because they'll know their own country's cultural and social history better than anyone else. And I think Mario Sesti, who's on the extras, representing that side of things on the disc, really does that job and hopefully helps to contextualize it for people.
mhm. The next film up that you have announced is another Truffaut film. So this is your third Truffaut that you've put out. And this is the reason why I love Radiance so much, because you keep putting out Truffaut films that I've never heard of. And they're often starring great actresses, and this one does as well, with Isabella Gianni, who's obviously best known for Possession and Ishtar, if you are a fan of trash. Um, this is the story of Adele H. It looks like it's a kind of costume or period drama, which is something I would have never expected from Truffaut. Pretty much all of my experience with Truffaut is French New Wave stuff, and then obviously, of course, the stuff that you've put out already. So if you had told me that Truffaut had made a period drama, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But now I know that he did, and I'm looking forward to watching that one. Um, with that one. Again, I assume it's something you probably had seen at some point and kind of stuck with you then, is that right?
I'm a big Truffaut fan. I mean, I like all his films. I don't think Truffaut made a bad film,
Mm,
personally. Um, so I knew all these Truffauts were available, and I thought it would be a great collection. And I was also very much aware that these films have kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit because they're all MGM titles. I think they never kind of got the exposure that um, the the films that are more readily available that we've already seen from uh, who had them like well BFI got them now, and then before
yeah.
them it was Artificial Eye, and before them I think it was Park Circus. So these same Truffauts, all the ones owned by MK2, have just done the rounds over and over and over again.
Hmm.
And they're the great ones. That's 400 Blows. It's Jules et Jim. It's all the Antoine Doinel films. It's Anne and Muriel, etc., etc. They're great. I love those. But I think these other ones are great fun as well. And all being well, hopefully we'll get to all of them. But I chose the order because I sort of thought this is kind of the easiest way in to these Truffaut films. So The Bride Wore Black, as it's a crime mystery. It's got the Kill Bill illusions, and
Yeah.
then Mississippi Mermaid's another Cornell Woolrich adaptation, another crime, a color noir. And then Adele H is the first sort of step away from that. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this one fares. I mean, it's Isabella Gianni, as you noted, who I think Possession has just grown so much in notoriety in recent years that hopefully that will help. But I just kind of feel like Possession is just this one-off kind of an anomaly. I think I was discussing it with Daniel Bird recently, and we were sort of saying Possession is the one Zhawarsky film everyone will watch, and then no one will watch any other Zhawarsky films apart from you know Zhuavsky's fans, and there is that risk. So it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, she was an incredible actress, and she is equally brilliant in this. But it is a bit of a change of pace. So it's going to be really interesting to see what people make of it.
And from going by the blurb, it doesn't seem to be just a straight kind of traditional period piece. There does seem to be this kind of psychological undertones, I guess, or like sort of heavy tones underneath. Would that be right?
It's definitely a darker film.
Mm.
It's she's being rejected by Bruce Robinson. She's Adele Hugo, the daughter of Victor Hugo,
Hmm.
the novelist, and she's become obsessed with him, and he's not interested, and she obsesses and follows him and goes after him, and and she causes her life to be ruined basically as a consequence of this. And it is much darker than perhaps it appears. And she's absolutely right for the role because she can kind of do that. She can get around that kind of performance like maybe other actresses wouldn't be able to.
Mm.
Um, and it's definitely one of Truffaut's darker films. I'm struggling to remember what year it is now. I think it's towards the back end. I mean, I think Truffaut's works did get a bit darker as he got a bit older. I'm thinking the Green Room's also quite dark. Um, so yeah, it's a different one, as I say, and it's a good one. Like I said, I don't think Truffaut made a bad film. And this it's a solid drama. Bruce Robinson, when he made it, he was like besotted with Truffaut. He said that he learned everything from Truffaut, and then kind of gave him the confidence to go and be a director himself. And he obviously went to do with Nail and I.
Yeah,
But
oh yes, of course, yeah.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah,
The last film then, which is the one I was sort of most excited about, the Panic in Year Zero. The reason why this is kind of the one I'm most excited about is because I adore Ray Milland. He's one of my favorite actors ever. I think he's just phenomenal, and I think he's underrated, especially when you like he should be like talked about with Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart and all those other guys from the 40s and 50s. I think Ray Milland should be talked about just as much. I think he's phenomenal. So releasing a film that obviously he starred in but also directed, I'm so excited for this one. I've never seen it. I'd heard of it. So it's one of the few that you've released that I've heard of, but I've never gotten around to see it. So I'm really excited to watch this one. Um, it also randomly has Frankie Avalon in it, which I only know Frankie Avalon from a really bad slasher film called The Haunted House of Horror, which I don't know if you're aware of. Um, that's the only reason I know him. I know that he apparently was a sort of teen idol back in those days. But yeah, Panic in Year Zero is one I'm just super excited for because of Ray Milland.
yeah. I mean, I think this one is. I mean, I'm a big, not a big. I don't know. I like sci-fi,
Mm.
um, and so this is that kind of Cold War bomb, paranoia, sci-fi type thing that I love. And this is a good kind of dystopian um sci-fi. Yeah, I mean it's just really good fun. And every now and again I think it's nice to put one of these out. We did Scream and Scream Again, which is another kind of mad sci-fi. And it's difficult to kind of get these in any quantity because I don't kind of want this type of thing to take over. Again, going back to what I was saying earlier, I want to keep that nice mix going. But
Yeah.
um, I do like this genre, but it's been pretty well plundered. So it's not like there's loads of these just kind of sitting on the shelf. But it's nice to be able to get one for sure.
Yeah, 100%. It's nice that the balance between the kind of the schlock and the classiness to kind of have that that balance between the two. Um, Perfect. So those were the August announcements that will obviously be out in November. I believe you're doing your normal thing where if you bundle them, you get a discount. I don't know if you want to tell listeners about that just in case they're interested in doing that.
Yeah, so every month on our website, if you buy at least four of the new releases, I mean, sometimes there only are four, but occasionally there's five, you get 10% off. And we run that for the month from one announcement to the next. So that's live now on the site.
Awesome. Right, so we're just gonna, before we obviously close off, I'd love to just quickly kind of run through the July releases that just came out. Because I watched them and I enjoyed all of them, so I'd love to just kind of get your thoughts on each one, even if it's only really quick. We mentioned 18 years in prison briefly. As I said before, I'm not a huge Yakuza guy, but I did enjoy this one a lot because it had that kind of mix of the prison movie as well. Um, and I felt that was a good dynamic for me as somebody who kind of struggles with the fast-paced nature of a lot of Yakuza movies, having those kind of slower scenes, those kind of more methodical scenes in the prison. I really enjoyed this one, and this is actually the only of the Taikata releases that I've watched so far. I still have to actually watch the other two. Yeah, the other two that have come out. Obviously, there's another one coming out at the end of this month, so there'll be four in total. So I need to try and catch up on them. But obviously, this is obviously a director that you know, personally must enjoy. You've put out, you know, well, you're going to be putting out four of his films in total so far, you know, by the end of this month. So he's obviously a director that must be kind of close to your heart.
Yeah, I mean, I struggle to remember what the first Taiketo I saw. Oh no, it was I the Executioner. I was
Mm.
researching the world noir. That's what it was. Um, I was watching. I watched maybe 100 kind of international noir films, and I was reading voraciously about noir in other countries. And I the Executioner was mentioned in an essay, which I forget now. And I thought, well, let's check that out. It went on the list, and I watched it, and I was knocked out by it. And I thought, great, we'll put that in one of our world noir collections. And something must have caused me to see more Taiketo stuff. And I watched By a Man's Face, uh, or was it 18 Years? One of them. And I thought, this is great as well. I really enjoyed them. And I just kept watching Taiketo films, and we ended up with the four that we've got now. And I, the Executioner, then had to come out of World Noir because I thought, oh, well, you know, this is deserving of its own collection,
Mhm.
which is sometimes a bit difficult when you've got overlap between kind of different strands. Um, but I felt Taiketo was really deserving of that focus. And 18 years in prison, I thought, well, this is great because you know, I'm certainly conscious of the fact that we've got a lot of people saying, "Oh, not another Yakuza film," and I just sort of thought, well, I think Taiketo is a bit different. Like, as you said, this one, all right, it's got Yakuza themes to it, but I mean, I think that's just the backdrop. It is a prison
Yeah.
movie more than anything, and I sort of, when watching it, I thought this is if this were a kind of a Hayes era studio film, you know, like a Raoul Walsh or something, people would be saying it's a masterpiece. And I just kind of thought it had that vibe. And I thought a lot of people would um, really like it. And I thought it's, you know, a good one to add in the mix. Um, and the people who do like Yakuza films are going to enjoy it as well, because I think it is a really satisfying genre film. And I just loved it when I saw it. I mean, yeah, like obviously, you know, thought that Taiketo was a bit of a knockout. Um, and I struggle with people sort of saying, oh, "What's your favorite Taiketo film?" I do struggle. I think they're all really really good. So it's hard to sort of recommend this one over the others, but
Mhm.
I think if people could start with this one and continue their kind of Taiketo journey. Their you know viewing of his work could start at any place really, but this is probably a good one to start with.
Mhm. And I know that people are wanting more because again, that was one of the most common questions I got on that Reddit post was, is there going to be more Takedo? Is there going to be more? So I know that people want more, so maybe we'll see more in the future if you can get your hands on them.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the difficult things is I do kind of have this. I've got a, like a kind of tracker, I suppose, where I sort of think, oh, we want to do this and we want to do this, and there's not enough space to get all the threads in. So I am quite conscious of
Hmm.
having all the threads continue to run, and then it's all a bit like, oh, well, we're not seeing any new stuff. We're seeing like sequels to stuff we've done, if you like.
Yeah.
So I'm conscious to kind of spread it out. It is very easy to sort of think, yeah, let's jump on the, the bandwagon while it's a success and do that. But I am also really excited to show people other directors. There is, in particular, I'm thinking specifically with Taika. There's another Japanese director we're going to do a film of next year, who I also think is great. So I hope people are happy with a little Taika rest while we focus on someone else for a minute.
That's understandable because otherwise you end up having to put out, 6, 7, 8, 10 titles every month if you're wanting to keep all the threads
Yeah,
going while also
exactly.
having new stuff. So yeah, for it makes sense to kind of have those breaks in between. Um, the next release up to I'm just going in terms of the spine numbers here. Zhao Pantin. So right, when I watched all these, I watched them pretty much all the kind of stuff within a week, and this was the one I left to last because I was the least excited about this for some reason. I can't remember exactly why. I think maybe because I hadn't heard of the director and I didn't really know any of the actors, whereas I had a connection with the rest of the films. So I kind of left this one to last as I was, it was the one I was kind of least excited about, I guess, to use that phrase. And this film has absolutely blown me away. I actually can't stop thinking about it. It might be the best film I've seen this year. I think it's insanely good. Um, it reminded me a lot of The American Friend, the Wim Wenders
Mm,
film, just
yeah.
like aesthetically. Has that kind of neo-noir but like this really interesting color grading. The performances are all insane, especially from kind of Kalush, who I had no idea was a comedy actor because I did it backwards. I watched the introduction after I finished the movie because sometimes with introductions they can be a bit spoilery. So I watched it afterwards and I was like, oh wait, what? That guy, that this sort of brooding guy is actually just like apparently one of the biggest sort of crude comedy actors of France of that era. I couldn't believe it. Um, but yeah, this film it blew me away in all aspects. I love how it looked. The performances from the three leads were all phenomenal. The score is awesome. The
Mm,
script is great as well. It has like this kind of wittiness. There's that line where Lola says to Kalusha's character that, I can make you some eggs. And he's like, oh, my life is scrambled enough as it is. Just like
mm.
a really funny kind of off the cuff line that still fits. It doesn't take you out of the film or anything. It's still, it still all works. It's not a comedy film by any means, but like it's just a good funny line. Um, but yeah, this film was a knockout for me. I've been going around recommending it to everybody since I saw it. I've been going to all my Discord channels. I've been saying it on Reddit. I've been putting it everywhere. Just everybody needs to watch this film because of how insanely good it is.
I'm very, very happy to hear you say that, because I think probably the two titles that stick out the most are this and Misunderstood. And both of them I was also really knocked out by, but I had real misgivings about them because, well, for one, I sort of thought, who wants to watch a film called Misunderstood about two boys and some tragedy? It just sounds so ugh. But I thought it was so good. I thought I don't care. I think it's a masterpiece. I have to do it. And I've since had people saying it's a masterpiece. You've got to watch it. And I think that's going to help. I mean, it's not going to kind of become a success overnight, but I'm willing to have these kind of films on the side that will have that slow burn, great word of mouth. And I think Chow Pantan is starting to get that now. It's sort of out a couple of weeks, and it's great to hear people say that. I mean, I think Pantan has a similar problem in that it's called Chow Pantan, and the English title is So Long Stooge, which I sort
Mm,
of thought was dreadful and
yeah.
didn't make any sense and isn't a direct translation. where it's sort of like a rough translation. I just thought it sounded rubbish. I thought, let's just go with the original French, as you know, many international films are known by their original titles, and that works fine. So I thought, well, maybe something a bit more um, obscure and difficult to understand in the title would be a bit more intriguing with the visuals. And hopefully that kind of turns out to be true because, like you say, you know, people are loving the tone of it and the score and likewise, you know, which I wrote in the synopsis. The performances are incredible. I mean, they both won César awards
Yeah.
for their performances, and that they are fantastic. Um, yeah, I was just so taken with it. Again, it was, as I said, misunderstood. It was when I watched it and I thought, I have to do this. I have to release it. It's just so good. So it's nice when you get that feedback. You know, it's a big part of why I, you know, continue to do films like this to kind of to get that oh yeah moment where people, you know, are
Vindication.
just so excited and want to share it. You know, because I remember having that before I was in this industry. Before I worked in home video, I was in cinema exhibition. I always wanted to work in Blu-ray, but I was on the other side of the industry. But I was a big fan, you know, Criterion and Masters of Cinema. I was buying all their DVDs and experiencing filmmakers for the first time. So all of this has very much been about, you know, recapturing that feeling. So it's nice when it sort of, you know, comes together.
For sure. And yeah, this was definitely a knockout, and it's great that you take chances on these types of films, you know, where other companies might overlook them. Um, the next spine up then, Spine 64, is the Hal Ashby release for The Landlord, um, which again I thought was very good. It's another film where the performances are really standout. It threads that line as well between kind of comedy and drama really well because
Mm,
there is a lot of really funny moments, especially Lee Grant. She's a knockout in this film.
yeah,
So there's a lot of funny moments, but like there's so much kind of the social drama stuff happening underneath where kind of like with Slap the Monster on page one, it's still so relevant today. You know, a lot of the class and racial stuff is still so relevant today, even though it was
yeah.
made in 1970, which is sad. But it also, you know, it does kind of help engross a modern viewer a lot of the time. Um, but yeah, the cast in this is really great. Obviously, Beau Bridges is the main character, who is this man child, Elgar, who is not very likable. He's not like antagonistic or anything, but he's not a very likable guy. And Beau Bridges plays him very well. Lee Grant is his mother, who I think is phenomenal in this film. And then the whole sort of very cast of black actors are all fantastic as well. Dan Sands, Pearl Bailey, Melvin Stewart, Louis Gossett. The whole those kind of like supporting roles really do kind of raise the film up a level, I think, because Beau Bridges does kind of disappear a lot in the movie just because that's his character, the nature of his character. He's described as casual by Diane Sand's character, and he is casual in his own movie as well, and that he kind of drifts in and out of the narrative so much, even though he is the central figure. And that really allows the rest of the cast to really step it up and be such huge parts of this film and why it's great.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's Bill Gunn's script. You know, I
Mm,
think it's making those supporting characters stronger and more credible, and that, you know, Hal Ashby was able to get all these incredible actors, all these incredible performances. You know, as you said, really lifts the film. Um, I was knocked out by The Landlord. I thought it was brilliant. I couldn't believe it was as good as it is because I knew it was his debut. It's got this horrendous poster, which is
yeah.
possibly the reason I put off watching it for so long. I just sort of thought, well, you know, this looks like some bad sex comedy, and um, I just sort of reluctantly put it on. I was like, oh, you know, let's just check this out because I love Hal Ashby. Um, you know, Harold and Maude and Shampoo and Being There. You know,
Yeah.
he made these great films, and I just sort of went in with this preconception of this debut probably only being okay, and I just think it's brilliant. You know, he hit the ground running so much. I mean, I think someone said, I can't remember who it was, said, the best editors make directors. Might have been Alexander McKendrick, um, who said that. I think it was him. And I think that's definitely true in this case. He'd obviously, worked on all these films and knew about cutting rhythms and knew, how to put a film together with Milos Forman, who's obviously, a big help in
Yeah.
terms of putting the film together as producer. And it's just brilliant. The performances are incredible, and it's still relevant now. It's still got interesting things to say. It's funny. It's really funny, but it's also really touching as well. I think it's great, and I think the challenge with it was, to try and make it a bit more appealing. Those two doorbells, that look like a pair of tits. Basically, it's just ridiculous. It's just the stupidest poster I've ever seen. And it's not like that at all, not really. There are some sex relationship stuff in there, but it's serious. It's not Confessions of a Window Cleaner or something, which is how the poster makes it look. And I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, no, the artwork that you used on the kind of main cover is so much better. That's definitely one I'm not going to turn over. For my shelf, I do much prefer the artwork that you guys put on. Um, yeah, and what you're saying about the editing, definitely like some of the funniest moments were those kind of almost. I feel dirty saying this, but those kind of Family Guy-esque cutaway gags that happen throughout the film.
Yeah,
That's all I could kind of think about when they were happening. But there was one in particular with Lee Grant that I won't spoil. That I was rolling around laughing. The cutaway when Lee Grant finds out about one of the characters being pregnant was just, I was on the floor laughing. I
yeah,
thought it was amazing. So yeah, that you can definitely tell the editing is so snappy. And then, sorry, the last film, just because obviously I don't want you to be stuck with me all evening, Fran, as much as I would talk your ear off all evening. The last film that we are going to just quickly talk about, Mississippi Mermaid. So I alluded earlier when we talked about Adele H. One of the reasons I love you guys so much is because you keep putting out Truffaut films I'd never heard of. And this one kind of took the cake with me because not only was it a Truffaut film, but it stars Jean-Paul Belmondo and Catherine Deneuve, who are obviously two phenomenal actors. Belmondo is one of my favorite actors. I love all of his work with Godard. Um, so the fact that this film came out and I was like, well, I had never heard of this, but this is going to be. I can't wait to watch this, and it was really really good. It was really great. Belmondo and Deneuve are both fantastic. That kind of color noir is really cool. What I kind of like about it though is that it is almost like a film in two halves, in that the first half you can tell is very much kind of Hitchcockian, sort of traditional Hitchcockian thriller, which makes sense as it's Truffaut and he loves Hitchcock. But the second half does become a bit more new wavy in that it becomes looser. It becomes more about the character's journey, both kind of, their physical journey across escaping, the law, but also their kind of journey with their own relationship. Um, so like in another world, could you cut 30 minutes out of this movie and make it a really tight Hitchcockian thriller? Yeah, you probably could. And some people maybe would prefer that, but I really liked the kind of turn that the film takes halfway through because we got like an hour into the film and I'm like, okay, well, he solved the plot now. Surely there's not much more to go with here. But then it just kind of takes that journey, which I didn't expect, but I also really, really liked.
yeah. Agreed. I mean, I think this is Truffaut having fun, really. I mean, he obviously loved the genre, um, and it's yeah, like I said, it's just I think it's him having fun and him working with these different actors. And Jeanette Von I won't spoil it, but Jeanette Von Sandoe says interesting things about the casting, which I really hadn't thought of when I was watching the film, which um, did kind of change my view on it. And I haven't seen it since seeing her interview because we tend to watch all the extras last. Well, I do anyway.
Same.
Even when I'm QCing, I kind of go in order. So yeah, I'd be fascinated to see what people think after seeing her comments, which are interesting. And yeah, I mean Truffaut. I mean, when we're researching stuff, it is interesting to hear all the behind the scenes stuff, particularly with his letters. Um, when he's going back and forth on producing these films and the challenges he has. So it's really interesting to work on them from that perspective, because there's all this stuff available for Truffaut, which is incredible. Which is, you just don't get that with many other filmmakers, and we're certainly not with the Japanese filmmakers. We've got all these letters that he wrote about the plans, and how he had this two film plan to do these two Cornell Woolrich adaptations, and when he was negotiating all that stuff. So it does add a lot more color to the film. No pun intended. But yeah, that's a great part of working on this stuff, and yeah, I particularly enjoyed that with Truffaut.
Perfect. Well, look, that's pretty much what we have now. Obviously, we talked about everything. Um, for the next episode, which will be sometime, after the next announcements, obviously we're talking about the September releases and talking about the films that are coming out at the end of this month, which to just pull them up in front of me here so don't misremember, we got World Noir 2, Takajiro Lonikusa, and Viva la Muerte. So I'll have another special guest on next month. We're going to talk about those movies, plus kind of react to the September announcements. This will be a monthly show, around kind of the same time every month, around when the announcements go up. Obviously, I'll have new guests on every month as well to kind of talk about this stuff with me. So if you've listened, if you've gotten all the way to the end of this episode, I appreciate you coming on and having a listen. Fran, I very much appreciate once again you making this time to come and talk about this stuff with me, because it's been a real honor and pleasure to have you on. And yeah, if you're listening and you're going to go on this journey with me, then I really appreciate you. Obviously, the social links will be in the description if you want to follow on Twitter to kind of keep up with the latest news. And yeah, I think we'll wrap up from here. Thank you, Fran.
Thank you.